Part 1 of Chapter 24 of My Bondage and My Freedom by Frederick Douglass, narrated by Greducator. 21 months in Great Britain. List of chapter topics. Good arising out of unpropitious events. Denied cabin passage. Proscription turned to good account. The Hutchinson family. The mob on board the Cambria. Happy introduction to the British public. Letter addressed to William Lloyd Garrison. Time and labors while abroad. Freedom purchased. Mrs. Henry Richardson. Free papers. Abolitionists displeased with the ransom. How the author's energies were directed. Reception speech in London. Character of the speech defended. Circumstances explained. Causes contributing to the success of his mission. Free Church of Scotland. Testimonial. The allotments of Providence, when coupled with trouble and anxiety, often conceal from finite vision the wisdom and goodness in which they are sent, and frequently what seemed a harsh and invidious dispensation is converted by after experience into a happy and beneficial arrangement. Thus, the painful liability to be returned again to slavery, which haunted me by day and troubled my dreams by night, proved to be a necessary step in the path of knowledge and usefulness. The writing of my pamphlet in the spring of 1845 endangered my liberty and led me to seek a refuge from republican slavery in monarchical England. A rude, uncultivated fugitive slave was driven by stern necessity to that country to which young American gentlemen go to increase their stock of knowledge, to seek pleasure, to have their rough democratic manners softened by contact with English aristocratic refinement. On applying for a passage to England on board the Cambria of the Cunard Line, my friend James N. Buffum of Lynn, Massachusetts, was informed that I could not be received on board as a cabin passenger. American prejudice against color triumphed over British liberality and civilization, and erected a color test and condition for crossing the sea in the cabin of a British vessel. The insult was keenly felt by my white friends, but to me it was common, expected, and therefore a thing of no great consequence, whether I went in the cabin or in the steerage. Moreover, I felt that if I could not go into the first cabin passengers could come into the second cabin, and the result justified my anticipations to the fullest extent. Indeed, I soon found myself an object of more general interest than I wished to be, and so far from being degraded by being placed in the second cabin, that part of the ship became the scene of as much pleasure and refinement during the voyage as the cabin itself. The Hutchinson family, celebrated vocalists, fellow passengers, often came to my rude forecastle deck and sung their sweetest songs, enlivening the place with eloquent music as well as spirited conversation during the voyage. In 2 days after leaving Boston, one part of the ship was about as free to me as another. My fellow passengers not only visited me, but invited me to visit them on the saloon deck. My visits there, however, were but seldom. I preferred to live within my privileges and keep upon my own premises. I found this quite as much in accordance with good policy as with my own feelings. The effect was that with the majority of the passengers, all color distinctions were flung to the winds, and I found myself treated with every mark of respect from the beginning to the end of the voyage, except in a single instance, and in that I came near being mobbed for complying with an invitation given me by the passengers and the captain of the Cambria to deliver a lecture on slavery. Our New Orleans and Georgia passengers were pleased to regard my lecture as an insult offered to them, and swore I should not speak. They went so far as to threaten to throw me overboard, and but for the firmness of Captain Judkins, probably would have, under the inspiration of slavery and brandy, attempted to put their threats into execution. I have no space to describe this scene, although its tragic and comic peculiarities are well worth describing. An end was put to the melee by the captain's calling the ship's company to put the saltwater mobocrats in irons. At this determined order, the gentlemen of the lash scampered, and for the rest of the voyage conducted themselves very decorously. This incident of the voyage, in 2 days after landing at Liverpool, brought me at once before the British public, and that by no act of my own. The gentlemen so promptly snubbed in their meditated violence flew to the press to justify their conduct and to denounce me as a worthless and insolent Negro. This course was even less wise than the conduct it was intended to sustain, for, besides awakening something like a national interest in me and securing me an audience, it brought out counterstatements and threw the blame upon themselves, which they had sought to fasten upon me and the gallant captain of the ship. Some notion may be formed of the difference in my feelings and circumstances while abroad from the following extract from one of a series of letters addressed by me to Mr. Garrison and published in the Liberator. It was written on the 1st day of January, 1846. My dear friend Garrison, up to this time I have given no direct expression of the views, feelings, and opinions which I have formed respecting the character and condition of the people of this land. I have refrained thus purposely. I wish to speak advisedly, and in order to do this, I have waited till, I trust, experience has brought my opinions to an intelligent maturity. I have been thus careful, not because I think what I say will have much effect in shaping the opinions of the world, but because whatever of influence I may possess, whether little or much, I wish it to go in the right direction, and according to truth. I hardly need say that, in speaking of Ireland, I shall be influenced by no prejudices in favor of America. I think my circumstances all forbid that. I have no end to serve, no creed to uphold, no government to defend, and as to nation, I belong to none. I have no protection at home or resting place abroad. The land of my birth welcomes me to her shores only as a slave, and spurns with contempt the idea of treating me differently, so that I am an outcast from the society of my childhood and an outlaw in the land of my birth. Quote, I am a stranger with thee, and a sojourner, as all my fathers were. End quote. That men should be patriotic is to me perfectly natural, and as a philosophical fact, I am able to give it an intellectual recognition. But no further can I go. If ever I had any patriotism or any capacity for the feeling, it was whipped out of me long since by the lash of the American soul drivers. In thinking of America, I sometimes find myself admiring her bright blue sky, her grand old woods, her fertile fields, her beautiful rivers, her mighty lakes, and star-crowned mountains. But my rapture is soon checked, my joy is soon turned to mourning. When I remember that all is cursed with the infernal spirit of slaveholding, robbery, and wrong, when I remember that with the waters of her noblest rivers, the tears of my brethren are borne to the ocean, disregarded and forgotten, and that her most fertile fields drink daily of the warm blood of my outraged sisters, I am filled with unutterable loathing, and led to reproach myself that anything could fall from my lips in praise of such a land. America will not allow her children to love her. She seems bent on compelling those who would be her warmest friends to be her worst enemies. May God give her repentance before it is too late, is the ardent prayer of my heart. I will continue to pray, labor, and wait, believing that she cannot always be insensible to the dictates of justice or deaf to the voice of humanity. My opportunities for learning the character and condition of the people of this land have been very great. I have traveled almost from the Hill of Howth to the Giant's Causeway, and from the Giant's Causeway to Cape Clear. During these travels I have met with much in the character and condition of the people to approve, and much to condemn, much that has thrilled me with pleasure, and very much that has filled me with pain. I will not, in this letter, attempt to give any description of those scenes which have given me pain. This I will do hereafter. I have enough and more than your subscribers will be disposed to read at one time of the bright side of the picture. I can truly say I have spent some of the happiest moments of my life since landing in this country. I seem to have undergone a transformation. I live a new life. The warm and generous cooperation extended to me by the friends of my despised race, the prompt and liberal manner with which the press has rendered me its aid, the glorious enthusiasm with which thousands have flocked to hear the cruel wrongs of my downtrodden and long enslaved fellow countrymen portrayed, the deep sympathy for the slave, and the strong abhorrence of the slaveholder everywhere evinced, the cordiality with which members and ministers of various religious bodies and of various shades of religious opinion have embraced me and lent me their aid, the kind hospitality constantly proffered to me by persons of the highest rank in society, the spirit of freedom that seems to animate all with whom I come in contact, and the entire absence of everything that looked like prejudice against me on account of the color of my skin, contrasted so strongly with my long and bitter experience in the United States that I look with wonder and amazement on the transition. In the southern part of the United States, I was a slave, thought of and spoken of as property, in the language of the law, quote, held, taken, reputed, and adjudged to be a chattel in the hands of my owners and possessors, and their executors, administrators, and assigns, to all intents, constructions, and purposes whatsoever. Brevard's Digest, 224. In the northern states, a fugitive slave, liable to be hunted at any moment, like a felon, and to be hurled into the terrible jaws of slavery, doomed by an inveterate prejudice against color to insult and outrage on every hand, Massachusetts out of the question, denied the privileges and courtesies common to others in the use of the most humble means of conveyance, shut out from the cabins on steamboats, refused admission to respectable hotels, caricatured, scorned, scoffed, mocked, and maltreated with impunity by any one, no matter how black his heart, so he has a white skin. But now behold the change. 11 days and a half gone, and I have crossed 3,000 miles of the perilous deep. Instead of a democratic government, I am under a monarchical government. Instead of the bright blue sky of America, I am covered with the soft gray fog of the Emerald Isle. I breathe, and lo, the chattel becomes a man. I gaze around in vain for one who will question my equal humanity, claim me as his slave, or offer me an insult. I employ a cab. I am seated beside white people. I reach the hotel. I enter the same door. I am shown into the same parlor. I dine at the same table. And no one is offended. No delicate nose grows deformed in my presence. I find no difficulty here in obtaining admission into any place of worship, instruction, or amusement on equal terms with people as white as any I ever saw in the United States. I meet nothing to remind me of my complexion. I find myself regarded and treated at every turn with the kindness and deference paid to white people. When I go to church, I am met by no upturned nose and scornful lip to tell me, "We don't allow N-words in here." I remember about 2 years ago, there was in Boston, near the southwest corner of Boston Common, a menagerie. I had long desired to see such a collection as I understood was being exhibited there. Never having had an opportunity while a slave, I resolved to seize this, my first, since my escape. I went, and as I approached the entrance to gain admission, I was met and told by the doorkeeper in a harsh and contemptuous tone, "We don't allow N-words in here." I also remember attending a revival meeting in the Reverend Henry Jackson's meeting house at New Bedford, and going up the broad aisle to find a seat, I was met by a good deacon who told me in a pious tone, "We don't allow N-words in here." Soon after my arrival in New Bedford from the South, I had a strong desire to attend the Lyceum, but was told, "They don't allow N-words in here." While passing from New York to Boston on the steamer Massachusetts on the night of the 9th of December 1843, when chilled almost through with the cold, I went into the cabin to get a little warm. I was soon touched upon the shoulder and told, "We don't allow N-words in here." On arriving in Boston from an anti-slavery tour, hungry and tired, I went into an eating house near my friend Mr. Campbell's to get some refreshments. I was met by a lad in a white apron. "We don't allow N-words in here." A week or two before leaving the United States, I had a meeting appointed at Weymouth, the home of that glorious band of true abolitionists, the Weston family, and others. On attempting to take a seat in the omnibus to that place, I was told by the driver, and I never shall forget his fiendish hate, "I don't allow N-words in here." Thank heaven for the respite I now enjoy. I had been in Dublin but a few days, when a gentleman of great respectability kindly offered to conduct me through all the public buildings of that beautiful city, and a little afterward I found myself dining with the Lord Mayor of Dublin. What a pity there was not some American democratic Christian at the door of his splendid mansion to bark out at my approach, "They don't allow N-words in here." The truth is, the people here know nothing of the Republican Negro hate prevalent in our glorious land. They measure and esteem men according to their moral and intellectual worth, and not according to the color of their skin. Whatever may be said of the aristocracies here, there is none based on the color of a man's skin. This species of aristocracy belongs preeminently to the land of the free and the home of the brave. I have never found it abroad in any but Americans. It sticks to them wherever they go. They find it almost as hard to get rid of as to get rid of their skins. The second day after my arrival at Liverpool, in company with my friend Buffum and several other friends, I went to Eaton Hall, the residence of the Marquis of Westminster, one of the most splendid buildings in England. On approaching the door, I found several of our American passengers who came out with us in the Cambria, waiting for admission, as but one party was allowed in the house at a time. We all had to wait till the company within came out, and of all the faces expressive of chagrin, those of the Americans were preeminent. They looked as sour as vinegar and as bitter as gall when they found I was to be admitted on equal terms with themselves. When the door was opened, I walked in on an equal footing with my white fellow citizens, and from all I could see, I had as much attention paid me by the servants that showed us through the house as any with a paler skin. As I walked through the building, the statuary did not fall down, the pictures did not leap from their places, the doors did not refuse to open, and the servants did not say, "We don't allow N-words in here." A happy new year to you and all the friends of freedom.